I think we can start.
Sorry.
I think we can start.
Well, thank you everyone for participating with us this evening. Actually, good morning for colleague from South America, Andreia, Adriana in Brazil and Mexico. Good day for those who are in Europe, and good afternoon for colleagues in Indonesia. Welcome to the 10th International Seminar of Psychological and Economic Self-Constitution that for this year is organized and coordinated from Jakarta, Indonesia by Center of Social Representation Studies. As we are all witnessing from 2020, we are not yet able to get rid of the pandemic. We have been vaccinated for 3 or even 4 times, but it seems that the virus is accelerating its speed to compete with human brain, to compete with science's discoveries. But after 2 long years of isolation and uncertainty that become our new platform of our real life, we are able also to witness our strength, our courage, our struggle, and our resilience to cope this situation. It is therefore the topic of our seminar this year is new form of political, economical, and social resilience during the pandemic. I'm glad that this year we have received more than 15 papers and are welcoming participants from 3 different continents. Europe with the majority, of course, from Ukraine, Czech, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Even I don't know how to spell correctly. Serbia, Moldova to represent the country from Eastern Europe, and France, Germany, Netherlands, and Italy to represent Western Europe. And then from South America, we have a colleague from Brazil and Mexico. And from Asia, we only have from Indonesia, but I'm glad that this year it is not just represented by participants from Jakarta, but also participants from other regions in Indonesia, from Malang, from Kendari as well, which is located in Sulawesi. And that's why we are going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the same time after this opening, because we are living in 3 different time zones. As we have anticipated, the majority of the papers that will be presented today are the studies related to pandemic situation. The insertion of digital living that help us to survive is the main topic that we are going to listen. Therefore, we will find how that digital living is present in carrying on the education process, in surviving the art performance and cultural object, or in creating public opinion through the intensive use of social media. Besides that topic, we have some that represent the actual social problem as the war, the refugee, the immigration, the gender, or even power. Briefly, I would say that all the topics represent us, represent the complexity of our actual life during this very difficult time when we are not just dealing with coronavirus, but with humanity problem, as it is the war in Ukraine, or the social polarization in Brazil, or energy crisis that hit all of us, for example. And most of all, I'm very happy with all these topics because it shows that as member of academic communities, we are not just pursuing our career with our intelligence, with our research, with our presentation for international seminars like this one, but we are exercising as well our sensibility and our engagement to humanity. something which seems to be neglected in academic activities the last few decades when life was going well or even better. I thank you all for being with us today, and I wish you all will share a tremendous seminar. Thank you. I'm inviting Irina.
Dear colleagues and friends, I'm glad to greet you on the 10th Political and Economic Self-Constitution Seminar. This year, I'm in France, close to Paris. Due to war in Ukraine, I'm under temporary protection of France. This year, organization of this seminar was mostly conducted by Risa Permanadeli and Andreia Giacomozzi. Risa Permanadeli is connected from Indonesia and Andreia Giacomozzi from Brazil with 10 hours difference. And we had to take into account this while scheduling this year's seminar. In the end of this seminar today, we will share with you our plans for developing this event. The world changes a lot in these 10 years, starting from 2013, when the first seminar was held in Dnipro in Ukraine. Humanity almost overcame pandemic of COVID-19, I hope. And this year, the war in Ukraine started. The unbelievably cruel war in Europe. Obviously, this war, for me, it was obvious, it is my subjective opinion, this war cannot be finished in Ukraine. And we cannot predict what next year will bring us. But whatever happens in the world, this year showed us that when a team from 3 continents joins efforts, the event continues to gather scientists from around the world. And I hope next year our event will be even more interesting than it used to be during these 10 years. Thank you for joining us this year. And I would like to pass the word to Andreia Giacomozzi.
Thank you, Irina.
Good morning, people. Here in Brazil, it's 7 o'clock now. So good morning and good afternoon for you that are in Europe, and good night for those who are in Indonesia. So I would like to thank Irina and also Risa for hosting this event this year and to invite me to help with the organization. And it's a pleasure to me. And thanks also to our honor inviter, Annamaria de Rosa, that is here for the opening conference this year for us. So I will present Professor Annamaria de Rosa, that's here with us today. She is a former full professor of social representation and communication with Laboratory of New Media and Web Marketing, Faculty of Medicine and Psychology from Sapienza, University of Rome, Italy. She is the creator of the and the program of the director of the European International Joint PhD in Social Representations and Communication that was relaunched in 2022 as International Joint Doctorate in Social Representation, Culture and Communication. And she is a joint professor at University of Ottawa, Canada, and emeritus professor at University of Belgrano, Buenos Aires, Argentina also. So it's a great pleasure to us to have you, Annamaria, with us today to do your conference. So I wish a great event for all of us. Thank you, Annamaria, and the word is with you.
It's still mute, Annamaria.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me share the screen. Let me see if it's fine for you, if you're able to see.
Yeah.
I also want to advise that the connection may be unstable, and speaking, I start to use my iPhone to have a probably better connection than the one that it is in this accommodation, because I am moving from a site to another in a quite anyway. I would like to have the full screen, so it would be better. No, probably I have to.
Yes, presentazioni, Annamaria. Maybe you clicking presentation.
See, but I would prefer to have the full screen with the presentation. So let me do that. Okay. Is it fine now for you?
Okay.
Okay. So I start to apologize for having sent the title of this opening lecture only yesterday, because I would like to do a quite different presentation, but due some constraint from the logistic point of view, I am leaving since June. I indeed try just working during the night, and Andreia knows, because we are also organizing a conference for next year, a roundtable. So, indeed, just yesterday, I decided that I didn't want to renounce to the main focus that I would like to give to this lecture, for sharing a legacy to the work of Serge Moscovici, which is really closely related to the immigration and the refugee problem. And because of the invitation also to present research data, I will shift from this presentation of the book that has touched me so much and was my best company during the last 5 months I spent here, moving from a side to another. And so this title will give you the idea of this integration between from forced migration to cross-disciplinary nomadism. Moscovici theory fertilized by his life experience as a refugee. And so, but let's start first of all to thank for the kind invitation Irina, who has successfully launched this series of the PESC seminar. And I have the pleasure and also the honor to participate at least in 3. I remember my first one in Padua, the one in Brazil, last year organized by, with the great collaboration of Andreia Giacomozzi from Universidade Federal Santa Catarina in Brazil, and this year with Risa Permanadeli. So it's a very good trio indeed. You will see also the role of the trio in the book of Moscovici, the trio of METEC. You are not METEC, but anyway, it is a good trio. So many thanks also to all the participants who attended this inaugural opening lecture, and to the all-day presentation that I have also the honor to introduce and the pleasure to follow. Finally, I decided to open this PESC seminar by sharing with you some reflection based on the most significant book that I have has accompanied me during this summer from the emotional and intellectual point of view. Then I will present a selection of recent research results on one of the topics that since 2017 has engaged me in a broad research program on the social representation of immigrants, articulating field study involving immigrants of first and second generation, and media study, in particular analyzing scientific, political institutions, and media discourse on immigration. And indeed, there are more than 10,000 sources. Too often, they are sadly misused as an instrument of political propaganda, rather than as a societal issue, historical phenomenon to be addressed with adequate inclusive policy. I don't know if you see also the book. You see the book? Yeah. Let's start this inaugural lecture from a center indeed inspired by the social representation theory from Jakarta to its founder, Moscovici, by presenting this most touching book, appear in 2019, 5 years after his death in 2014. Narrating the fertilization of his disciplinary nomadism by his existential experience as a refugee in France from his born country, Romania. Mon style de recherche était marqué par le fait de que mon existence était en longue exil. This is something that he mentioned in the book. So I could say that I discovered a lot from this book, even though for many years I have read, almost indeed 40 years, I have read, studying and analyzing, even meta-theoretical analyzing, the opera Omnia of Serge Moscovici. Since I had the good luck in 1982 to meet him, and so there was a unique meeting on my intellectual path in a completely fortuitous way, right? We never know the life what reserved to us. I met him in a small meeting for very few most representative social psychologists in the world, and I was not among them. I was just sent by my professor in Rome, who was at that time one of the most influent social psychologists in Italy. And I was quite young and completely unknown in the international setting. And this meeting was in Ravello on the Amalfitan coast, near to my birth Salerno, from where today I am connected for this conference and that you can admire behind me. I want to share the beauty, because the beauty in the life is not only emotion, it's not only, the external side of our body, of the nature. It's something that can touch our soul and inspire us, even from the intellectual job. And also has a resilient effect, at least on me. So Ravello, indeed, which is another beautiful small town, quite a village on the Amalfitan coast, was not by chance also the wonderful small town chosen to start 10 years later in 1992, the dedicated international conference on social representation that to continue each 2 years, hopefully forever. And this next year will be in Colombia. As you can see by exploring the album of memory on the website dedicated to our international joint program, that I created, I dedicated this special album of memory when Serge Moscovici, that was in the last 4 years just honorary director because he was quite heavy sick and close in a elderly people structure. And I dedicated to him this album of memory that you can even give a look when you like, including also all the message that I received when he died and when I diffused it through the Soricom Thematic Network newsletter to all the community about this death. I received so many letters and so incredible reflection on his work that I decided to publish with the permission of his son, Pierre Moscovici and Denis Moscovici. And see here, you see on your right some of the page of this album, which is quite dynamic, and there are also a photo related to some event in which he provided the inspiration from his thought. So in 1992, indeed, was quite a magic year, because not only started the series of the conference dedicated to the social representation, but was also the magical year in which the idea to transform a dream that I had in my mind, cultivated thanks to the involvement of the research training in mobility exchange Erasmus around 13 universities in Europe. And when these 3 years collaborating for research rather than moving abroad only for making exam, the student in a meeting that I organized, inviting Moscovici and at that time all the the first generation of scientists. So I am speaking about Robert Farr, Jean-Claude Abric, Denis Jodelet, all the first generation of scientists from 13 universities in Europe, invited in a beautiful places in Rome, just in front of a Colosseum. But I also invited the students who participated to this Erasmus exchange, mobility, and working on 3 years on a project that I was interested in that time in looking at the articulation of a multidimensional identity and social representation. So place identity from home to town, to city, to nation, to European Union. And the students participated for 3 years. When they successfully completed their degree in psychology, that at that time was in 5 years, and the theses were at the level that currently are at the doctoral level. So the students were so happy for this experience, but so frustrated for the fact that this was over. I decided to invite them in this meeting that was the launching meeting for the doctorate. And I always remember our dean in front of the Colosseum. And at the end, they say, oh, that is a pity that this story finished. And I say, but let's continue. We can organize a doctorate. So I am always grateful to the student that inspire me to create a sort of international doctorate. And so, and I always say that this was a bottom-up inspiration, but brought to a top-down institutional dimension. And indeed, this 1992 was the year in which I presented the first project to European Union. At that time, it was called European Community. And it was approved. I was quite surprised because I didn't know nobody in the commission. And usually in Italy, people say that if you don't know somebody, you cannot never succeed. It is completely my contrary experience. This can work probably in the local setting in university where you have to manage agreement with but it has been never my experience. And this for me was a sort of a starting of liberation from the local competition. And I start to work only with the European, especially, not only indeed, but especially with European Commission program, because I have never known who evaluated the project and so on. I should say that to transform this dream into an institutional reality was probably at that time too innovative, as sometimes I realized from the resistance of the institution. that are mainly, I don't want to say forever or everywhere, but they have a bureaucratic apparatus to reproduce the system, not to innovate the system. No? It's the role of a bureaucracy. But sometimes some dream can be translated into reality and becoming later also a sort of a prototype of innovation for others. So from our first international joint doctorate in Europe, because there was the model of a co-tutel, which is more traditional and more known, but to have a joint program with the joint signature of several rectors on one diploma was really at that time a sort of a delirium. And sometimes when I go back, I say how it was possible. But it was possible also because Sergio Moscovici was a champion of innovative thought, as he has completely innovated the social psychology discipline in Europe and over the world, combining his freedom for methodology, for being beyond the border of a discipline. And so it was really one of the most innovative intellectuals I met in my life, and it is still a part of my soul. And so, but what I want to stress today is the role that this book, that j'adore, explain me in moving from this nomadism as a refugee from a country to another, and is a suffering, is a deep suffering, and is a deep loneliness and so, as a refugee in France, and at the same time how vital and resilient was the need for profound friendship and intellectual relationship. I already mentioned the trio de Metec, which is one of the chapters of this book. Paul Celan, Isaac Shiva, and Serge Moscovici, that he defined trois billets de loterie perdants. Because indeed, all of them, one of them was also suicide, and also Serge Moscovici, I discovered for my first time in this book, because he was, although our relation was quite deep and profound and always open, he was also a very discreet and reserved person. So I never suspect that he was strongly attempted by suicide for his because of this experience as a refugee. So this, in the secret fold of this posthumous book found as a treasure in a closet, we discovered the existential route led to the genesis and development of theory like social representation, active minority, the social history of nature, among them very much more intertwined than what is unfortunately still not yet recognized in the literature, no? Because there are people who love more experimental approach, who are more on the field of active minority, people who like more, let's say, less classical study and even integrating multidimensional and multi-methodological approach, and they prefer social representation, and social history of nature, which has been attracted a lot also people interested in ecology and political sciences. But there is a deep integration because it was one mind for many theory, but this theory was a cross-nomadism even in its social thinking. Let's say still some few words about this book. And it is impressive to see this certificate as a refugee obtained in France still mention his birth name. I don't know how many people among the very large scientific community in the world that know and appreciated his opera Omnia, or at least a part of it, knows that he was not called Serge, indeed. His first name was Strul, which is not the translation of Serge. No, Serge was the new identity imposed in a certain sense as a refugee in France, because probably in many countries, but in particular, I also found also French culture rather than inclusive, assimilating. People who want to incorporate. So if you don't speak perfectly French, for example, although you understand, and even your interlocutor in France doesn't speak your own language, for example, Italian in my cases. If you don't speak perfectly as they wish, they show you that they don't understand. That is not true. They can understand, but they mark the differences. So I was not a refugee in France. I was in France in a very special condition, but I have perceived a lot what Serge was saying in this book as a refugee, so in a very serious condition. And this, he say in this book, je suis venu à Paris en étranger. Je savais que je partirais en étrange. So, je me suis senti toujours très peu français à l'étranger et étrange en France. So to be, and often he told me that he was too French abroad and never enough French in France. And all that is related to his experience as a refugee. And the fact that his name was changed in Serge was an indicator of this process of naturalization and assimilation. But if you think about the depersonalization, which is one of the processes in which he articulated the social representation, you can also create a link between this experiential personal condition as a refugee and the genesis of his nature. And for example, this active minority theory. This is another part strictly related that I understood because it is not so explicit, but there is some reference in the book that I would like to present you in a more detailed way. But at the same time, I wanted to reply to the demand of Irina to present new research data. So I didn't feel completely free to dedicate all this lecture only to this book. But I really hope that it is enough what I say to stimulate your interest in reading it, and probably some of you already know. But why active minority related to his existential, this loss of existential identity? He very deeply say and share with us this resistance he had in assimilating. For example, he dedicated some chapter to the Hebrew people in that he tried to be completely assimilated to be accepted. On the contrary, he always was trying to keep its own identity. And this is exactly what it means to be an active minority, no? To try to resist to the assimilation in the majority. Okay, I think that want only to say that one of the reasons that this summer I was also so touched by this book is because at the same time I was suffering, and I still suffering a lot, for the atrocity of the war in Ukraine and its consequence for the many refugees. On the other side, I was concerned also at the same time, for the development of the multi-year research program on immigration and articulating field study and media study. And, you know, this book that has an incredible high quality in terms of narrative style. No, it is not an academic book, but it is much better than an academic book. No, because what exactly Risa told before, it is not a book written and published. Indeed, the son found a long series of hand note, and you know how difficult it was sometimes to interpret it, because I'm sure that most of you has received a letter and signed by Moscovici, and was not so easy always to read them. So indeed, this coincidence of working on immigration, reading this book, and be always almost obsessively exposed to the atrocity of Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, was a coincidence that make me this book very significant. Now I think that you should control me in time, because each conference I try just to read the slide, and each conference I'm not always confident just in reading, and I associated my instant feeling. Anyway, now I would like move.
Annamaria, you still have 5 to 10 minutes, please.
Okay, so I will be quite quickly just to reply to the demand also of Irina to present new data. And these new data are indeed contextualized in this large project that was launched in 2017. That, as I mentioned, included a field study on immigrants, that if I would have time, I would present exactly this experiential field study based, and it was an occasion for me to invent a new technique that based on a drawing and telling a story. Because for the refugee and the immigrant, sometimes it's very painful to speak about their experience. Not by chance, Moscovici has produced this note when he was very old indeed, and the need to save memory. So telling a story while people draw, rather than to be interviewed by a questioner, was a way to respect the intimate freedom of people in telling their story.
I'm losing your voice, Annamaria.
I think there is something. You are returning, Annamaria. We didn't hear some part of your presentation.
Okay, so I just was mentioning that this discourse analysis was based on different level of sources, including also different social media like Facebook, Twitter, Yahoo Answer. So anyway, and Facebook. I also was mentioning this contribution of the Nobel Prize on the literature, that all these books are related to the migratory experience and drama of a refugee. But from, Nobel Prize to real people, these images are just not, are just self-speaking. migration is not a crime. And here there is the crime of a child that was died because of difficult experience of moving from a country to another. And as the Pope say, especially the Mediterranean Sea has become a cemetery. And here you have a main route of immigration, but we have to study immigration not only as in our current time, because this is a phenomenon that accompanies all this history, and it starts from a prehistory. And the flow of immigration and emigration can be in alternate direction, or can be even concurrent, but also sometimes in a different way. For example, Italy was a country of emigration last century, and before and after the World War, but has become now a country of immigration, but at the same time also of emigration, especially for the brain drain, because our best researchers move abroad after having developed all their school in Italy. So crossing a different route. Once again. And now very quick, still have some times, and I saw also from the program that there are other contributions touching on immigration, including from Andreia Giacomozzi. With whom indeed I am developing an extension also of our research, looking in particular to Brazil and Italy, but within a larger context, because our research since the beginning was never restricted to Italy or to Italian sources. And indeed, one of the input to enlarge collaboration to Andreia Giacomozzi, and I hope that next year we will be able to present our research. I had already the privilege to see preliminary result, but I didn't feel free to present anything without Andreia in this occasion. But we will soon discuss this data. And so here, very quickly, but stop me anytime I need to conclude my lecture, that are focused on two emblematic countries, Canada and Italy, that has a distinct history and the root of immigration. Because the root for immigrate is not, I have
3 minutes to
3 minutes. So
yes,
I just will show you these two maps to stress the fact that the way in which you arrive in a country by boat or by plane also influence the kind of immigrant that you are. We are speaking in Canada and in Italy about immigration as the immigrant would be the same, but indeed the immigrant in Canada is, for example, Lilian Negura, my partner in this research and also an historic partner of the European doctorate, because there is an economicistic view trying to attract the self-economic independent people, not solely the people who arrive on the boat as to it in the Italian coast. And indeed, there is also a constitutive land of immigration, because beside the indigenous and the aborigine that indeed are confined in their own territory, although there is a lot of rhetorical discourse to include them, but indeed there are, the identity of Canada is built on immigration. But now which kind of immigrant they are? Especially economic independent or people who can improve the economic condition of the country. But I would say that there is quite an inclusive and the promotion of immigration in Canada, and with a very moderate differences between the politically positioning of people who are the sources of a discourse, which is one of the most interesting results of our research. And I think the more interesting for this enterprise of launched by Irina that focus on political and economic discourse. In Italy, indeed, there was an alternate and even concurrent flow of immigration. And these are indeed the sources analyzed, so institutional policy-driven discourse that are articulated in Italian political institution and Canadian political institution. So the official discourse that we study from law, from the Canadian and the Italian political discourse affiliated to different and ideological oriented party. So left wing, center, and right, and especially extreme right. And also the NGO and the humanitarian association. So this discourse is articulated. We study these sources, relative variable. And for example, if the government was led by Conservative Party or Liberal Party in Canada, or Democrat Party in Italy, or for example, in this period there was the coalition with the populist movement, 5 Star, and right wing, so extreme right wing, Lega, and the different coalition with the 5 Star movement, populist, and left wing, the Conte 2. I think that I should close, but I want to just give you the feeling of this result that in Italy are much more polarized. As in countries like Brazil, for example, opposing Bolsonaro view to more moderate or left-wing oriented leader, or like say in the United States, what Trump has pursued, no? American first. American first, in my opinion, means American alone, because now in an interconnected world, you cannot build, imagine that in Italy, we would build a wall around all our coast. This is ridiculous, no? And we know that in this interconnected global world, it is very difficult to stop. But in the country like Italy, United States, even Brazil, other country, the discourse is very polarized. On the contrary, in Canada, for example, and this is an impressive result that I found not only analyzing comparative data in Canada and Italy, but also, as I will share with Andreia, who has collaborated also bringing new sources in our library. The library is not only a repository of sources, but as also a tool for analyzing the resources. And so,
Annamaria, I'm sorry, but time is
okay.
Pushing us,
Yes.
all of us.
Let me see only this. I stop with this. You see how many flags from Canada are in this. And this is an result that occur also in our comparative data with Brazil, because Canada has an articulated discourse around immigration, because it is a founding element of its identity. And on the contrary, for example, in Italy, there is a simplification because it means to be pro and against. And there is a political propaganda who built all the story. So thank you so much. Okay, if you want, I can share the presentation with you, and you can have also at the end the
Yes, that would be wonderful. It is a very good idea.
bibliography, okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annamaria, a lot. And you have mentioned several times that I had a demand. It was rather a request, because I know that you always have a very innovative approach to research design. That is why I asked you to share your new research for the wider audience to benefit from this knowledge and from this innovative approach. Still, you have always been very innovative, and you remain innovative. Thank you very much for your lecture.
No, thank you to you. And I want now to skip it, so I have to interrupt, no? Okay.
Thank you, Annamaria, for presenting your research.
Thank you for your patience, because I am a little bit after 750 conference in my life, I still feel embarrassed. It's difficult for me. So thank you for your patience.
Is there any question? Actually, Annamaria, for being honest, I share the same feeling as Moscovici when I was in France, because I was stranger, and they keep treating me as foreigner, although I speak French.
Yeah, I was wondering about Irina.
Well, in the beginning, experience was extremely bad, but I think it was not about France in general, but it was about particular people. And in every nation, there are different people. Also in Ukraine and in all countries, there are different people. But now I started to understand their behavior better, and definitely there are peculiarities. I would not say that there are no peculiarities in France. There are peculiarities regarding language. The French expect everybody to speak French, the whole world to speak French perfectly from the very beginning. And French pronunciation is quite difficult, at least for me. And learning another language at 42 is extremely difficult. But what I should say is that on the governmental level, what I experience now, the conditions for Ukrainians in France are much better, for example, if compared to the conditions in Denmark or in Germany, from stories which I hear. And regarding mentality of French people and German people, I would say that I can somehow adapt to French people, taking into account all that Annamaria mentioned, but I would not be able to adapt to German people because, well, they have different perception of what is the human interaction between people. And personally, I would not be able to adapt to that. And French people, with all their peculiarities, they remain human, much more human, with French wine, French cheese, French culture, French museums. Well, and there is also the shadow side. All nations have that.
I feel so happy to hear you, Irina.
And I have a wonderful French man with me. His name is Ernesto.
Because, you know, I was quite sad when I met you in France because of the first moment of adaptation in France and when you wanted to move to Switzerland. And, you know, I had no courage to ask you along this period, but you are like one of the symbols of Ukraine, no? Because you are really a person that I know, that I like, that I estimated. And, you know, and the
I think your connection is unstable.
places.
Annamaria.
Annamaria, we can't hear you. But I understood that you were supporting Ukrainians. Thank you for that. And your research regarding migration is also very important, and it is important for Ukraine as well. Unfortunately, I would like to mention that it was a very great idea of European Union that they invented and started this status of temporary protection. And Ukrainians are not refugees, but we are under temporary protection. And we have much more rights than refugees. We have right to work, we have medical insurance, we have social support money. And that was, it was my greatest respect to European Union for that. But still, finding work in France is a big challenge, and at present I don't see perspectives for myself, and I'm still very enthusiastic about moving to Switzerland. And as I am under temporary protection of France, we are now preparing additional documents for that. But I hope it will work.
I'm sorry because